Could humanity survive a third world war? This is a question that sends shivers down the spine of even the most hardened of us. It's a mind-boggling query that forces us to consider the unthinkable. In an era of technological advancements and global interconnectivity, the world's political landscape is as volatile as ever. The delicate balance of power can be tipped at any moment, potentially leading us down a path of vast devastation. Imagine the chaos, the destruction, the sheer horror of a global conflict on a scale never before seen. What would be the extent of human and environmental damage? How would our societies, our economies, our very way of life be affected? These are questions that need to be asked, as uncomfortable as they may be, so let's delve into this dark abyss. Let us explore the catastrophic scenarios that could occur if this unthinkable event were to happen. War, a devastating event, always begins with an initial strike. As we delve into the hypothetical onset of a third world war, let's consider the first few hours, the period of initial strikes. The first strikes of this imagined war would likely be nuclear. In the space of a few heartbeats, the world as we know it could be irrevocably changed. Major cities, the beating hearts of nations, could be reduced to rubble in an instant. The sheer power of a single nuclear weapon is staggering. Now imagine hundreds of these unleashed simultaneously, erasing centuries of history, culture, and civilization in the blink of an eye. The immediate impact would be cataclysmic. Buildings would crumble under the pressure wave of the nuclear blasts, burying countless lives under their wreckage. The fires ignited by the intense heat would consume all in their path, turning once vibrant cities into infernos. And let's not forget the human cost. Millions of lives would be extinguished in the initial moments. Not just soldiers but mothers, fathers, children, all caught in the crossfire of a conflict beyond their control. The loss of life would be unimaginable, a tragedy on an unprecedented scale. The nuclear fallout, the deadly rain that follows a nuclear explosion, would spread across the globe carried by the winds. It would contaminate the land, the water, and the air, affecting all forms of life. The fallout would not discriminate between friend and foe, laying waste to all in its path. The world would reel from the shock of these initial strikes. Governments would scramble to respond, their leaders faced with decisions that could determine the fate of humanity. The world's economy would teeter on the brink of collapse, as the destruction of major cities disrupts global trade and commerce. And this is just the beginning, the immediate aftermath of the initial strikes. The world would be thrust into a new and terrifying era, a world scarred by the indelible marks of a third world war. But as we shall see, the initial strikes are but the opening salvo in a conflict that would reshape the world. The aftermath of a global conflict would be even more catastrophic. In the wake of a third world war, the world as we know it would change drastically. The immediate damage from the initial strikes would be only the beginning. The fallout, both literal and figurative, would be far-reaching and profound. Imagine, if you will, a nuclear winter. The dust and debris kicked up by nuclear explosions would blanket the sky, blocking out sunlight. This would lead to a drastic drop in temperature, which would in turn affect global weather patterns. The result would be a world plunged into an unending winter, where crops would fail and ecosystems would collapse. But the devastation would not be limited to the environment. Governments, those that managed to survive the initial onslaught, would find themselves grappling with an unprecedented crisis. The collapse of governments would be inevitable in many parts of the world, as the infrastructures we rely on would crumble under the impact of the war. Without the structure and order provided by these systems, society as we know it would break down. The struggle for survival would become the main focus of life, replacing the mundane concerns of the pre-war world. People would be forced to fend for themselves, in a world where the rule of law has been replaced by the law of the jungle. In this post-war world, the struggle for resources would be intense. Food and clean water would become scarce commodities, more valuable than gold. Diseases, both old and new, would run rampant without the healthcare systems we take for granted today. In the face of all this, the resilience of the human spirit would be tested like never before. Communities would need to come together to survive, and new societies would need to be built from the ruins of the old. This is a bleak picture, but it's important to understand the full extent of the potential devastation. By understanding the consequences of a third world war, we can hopefully work towards preventing such a catastrophe from ever becoming a reality. The long-term effects of a third world war could be even more devastating than the immediate aftermath. In a world already grappling with the effects of climate change and environmental degradation, A conflict of this magnitude could push our planet beyond the brink. Picture this: vast landscapes scarred by nuclear fallout, once thriving ecosystems reduced to barren wastelands. The environment would bear the brunt of this devastation, with the potential for long-lasting damage that could last for centuries. Radioactive isotopes, the silent killers in the aftermath of a nuclear explosion, could seep into the soil, the water, and the very air we breathe, making vast regions of the planet uninhabitable. And it's not just the landscapes that would suffer. The creatures that inhabit these environments, some already on the brink of extinction, would face new, unthinkable threats. The delicate balance of biodiversity, a balance that took millions of years to perfect, could be utterly decimated in the blink of an eye. From the smallest insects to the largest mammals, no species would be safe from the effects of this catastrophic conflict. But let's not forget the most significant player in this tragic tableau: humanity itself. We, the architects of this potential Armageddon, would not be immune to its consequences. The radiation, the scarcity of resources, the collapse of societal structures, all these could lead to a drastic reduction in the human population. Some even predict the possibility of humanity's extinction, a chilling thought that underscores the severity of the situation. In the face of such a scenario, one can only hope that our leaders, our decision-makers, take heed of these cautionary tales. The stakes are too high, the potential damage too great, for us to ignore the lessons of history and the warnings of science. The long-term effects of a third world war would change the face of the earth forever. A world scarred by conflict, a world devoid of the rich tapestry of life we currently enjoy, is a prospect too grim to contemplate. Let us hope that such a future remains firmly in the realm of fiction. Beyond the physical destruction, the human cost of a third world war would be unimaginable. Let's delve into the psychological toll such a catastrophic event would have on survivors. Imagine the trauma of witnessing your world crumble, of losing loved ones, of being thrown into an uncertain future. Post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety would become widespread, casting a long, dark shadow over humanity. The mental health infrastructure, already stretched thin in many parts of the world, would be ill-equipped to handle this surge in need, exacerbating the crisis. Now let's shift our focus to the loss of cultural heritage. Our world is a rich tapestry of diverse cultures, each with its own unique history, traditions, and art. A third world war wouldn't just threaten individual lives, it would also pose a grave risk to this cultural diversity. Monuments, museums, libraries, places of historical and cultural significance could be reduced to rubble, erasing irreplaceable chapters of human history. This loss would be felt deeply, adding another layer of grief to an already devastated populace. Lastly, we must consider the potential loss of basic human rights in a post-war world. The chaos and instability of a third world war could provide a fertile ground for authoritarian regimes to rise and flourish. Democratic values we hold dear, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the right to a fair trial, could be curtailed or outright abolished. The world could find itself in a state of warlordism, where the rule of law is replaced by the law of the jungle. In the face of such a war, the very essence of what makes us human, our capacity for empathy, compassion, and cooperation, would be severely tested. Would we rise to the challenge, or would we succumb to our basest instincts? The human cost of a third world war would be a tragedy beyond comprehension. War, in all its forms, is a tragedy. A third world war would be a catastrophe beyond anything we can imagine. Today, we've journeyed through the unthinkable scenarios, from the initial strikes to the devastating aftermath, and the long-term effects that would ripple through generations. We've touched upon the incomprehensible human cost. It's essential to remember that these are not just hypothetical scenarios but potential realities if we allow conflict to escalate unchecked. Every life lost, every home destroyed, every dream shattered is a reminder of the dire consequences of war. The world has seen enough suffering. Instead, let's focus on diplomacy, understanding, and cooperation. Let's remember our shared humanity and work towards a world where peace prevails. A world where our children can dream of a future, not fear it. We must do everything in our power to prevent a third world war. The future of humanity depends on it.